I know I'm generalizing a bit, but I think many Unitarian Universalists would say that what drew them and keeps them in a UU congregation is the lack of guilt. Unlike many faith traditions, Unitarian Universalists do not use guilt and the fear of hell to encourage converts or keep people warming the seats long after they've stopped believing. Am I right? Well, I'm here to say that I wish we had a little more guilt, a little more courage to name the times when we've not acted according to our principles or the person we want to be. Now, shame is a different story. We don't need any of that. But guilt? A little guilt can do us good. Shame researcher Brene Brown notes the difference between guilt and shame as the difference between I did something bad, guilt, and I am bad, shame. The first can provide the impetus to make us want to do better, while the second traps us in a cycle of self-loathing and potentially worse behavior. So why do I wish we had a little more guilt? I think that little twinge of guilt can motivate us to do better, to seek restitution, to acknowledge our failings. A little bit of guilt may prompt us to call or write someone with an apology for something we did or something we failed to do. Maybe you know those as sins of commission and omission. If so, I know your religious background without asking. Today we are exploring what it means to have the courage to apologize and to forgive. Wait, forgiveness takes courage? Yes, especially when it is forgiving ourselves. I don't know about you, but the relentless movies in my mind love to remind me of shortcomings that go back 50 years or more. Forgiving ourselves is an ongoing process. It's not one and done. I will say I was not my best self while caring for my mother with advanced dementia. I'm still working on that layer of forgiveness. None of us has our stuff totally together. Tomorrow is Indigenous Peoples Day, only recently changed from Columbus Day. You're forgiven if you still automatically reference the person who opened up the floodgates of the European invasion of America, but do try to work on it for next year. You see, forgiveness is somewhat conditional. You are forgiven, but there is an expectation that there will be a change. I wonder what that looks like on a larger scale, that expectation that forgiveness is somewhat conditional, with an expectation that there will be change, that we will do better. In a time when other religious traditions are splitting, with both the Episcopalians and Methodists experiencing schisms over LGBTQ rights, Unitarian Universalists might feel a teensy bit superior. But I'm here to tell you that we have a complicated history as well as the complicated present that Emily Garrick shared with us a few weeks ago, which if you didn't see that, you can go to our YouTube channel, UU Amherst, and watch the video. It was really, really good and really, really important. Although we have learned better and tried to do better, our history is a complicated one. On the cusp of Indigenous Peoples Day, I want to share with you our history regarding Native Americans. I'm grateful to my colleagues, Reverend Karen Johnston and Reverend Dana Stivers, for their research and generosity in sharing their words. This is a hard history and an important one for us to know and address in light of the Eighth Principle's injunction to accountably dismantle oppressions. I remember the sick feeling in my stomach when I first encountered the reports of the discovery of graves of Native American children at residential schools in Canada. At that time, approximately 1,300 unmarked graves at 4 former schools in Western Canada shocked the world. And of course, since then, more have been discovered in Canada and in the United States. Officials have identified 53 schools with marked and unmarked graves and anticipate that the count will rise to thousands or tens of thousands of children in those graves. Let that sink in. Children forcibly taken from their homes to residential schools that were designed to wring out their Native identity, their culture, their language, their people. Tens of thousands of children. None of this was a surprise to Native communities, which have long held survivor stories of students digging graves for their classmates, or rumors of children disappearing under suspicious circumstances. Since 2017, human remains have been found in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, that are associated with families from these indigenous communities: Rosebud Sioux, Alaskan Aleut, Northern Arapaho, Blackfeet, Oglala Sioux, Oneida, Omaha, Modoc, and Iowa nations. It's very sad, but what does that have to do with us? Unitarians had their own residential schools. I have to be honest, that is not a thing I learned in seminary. Truly, it wasn't until I read Reverend Karen Johnston's sermon, much of which I'm including in paraphrase here, that I knew any of this history. But Unitarians not only were involved in establishing and managing a number of these schools in the 19th century, they were proud of their involvement as acts of service, of social justice. According to Reverend Dana Stiver, early Unitarian writings indicate that many Unitarians propagated or at least remained complicit in the popular idea that westward expansion of the American frontier marked an advance of civilization over the savagery of Native peoples. End quote. Reverend Samuel Atkins Elliott, president of the American Unitarian Association, the 19th century equivalent of the UUA, wrote in his thesis at Harvard, "Indians as a race are inferior intellectually to white men, but this is not or should not be the object of Indian education to make Indians scholars. We do not expect now from the Indian any contribution to national thought or character. Indians must be taught to live properly before they can be taught to think and act with judgment and independence." End of quote. I don't know about you, but I need a drink of water. As Reverend Karen Johnston notes, when we hold history with integrity, we find that nearly or fully forgotten aspects begin to emerge. That is what happened in the Unitarian Universalist universe. In 2007, delegates at General Assembly called for our faith movement to uncover our links and complicity with the genocide of Native peoples. Out of that, it became more widely known that in 1870 to 1876, the American Unitarian Association worked with the Ute tribe in Colorado under the Grant Peace Policy, and did so to present them the better phases of a Christian civilization. In 2009, UUA President William G. Sinkford, our first president of color, used the occasion of General Assembly to offer a formal apology to the Ute tribe for the Unitarians' historical complicity in crimes and violence against their people. The apology was accepted by a member of the Ute Nation. Apology and forgiveness. Both acts require tremendous courage. It would be so much easier to try to just bury that uncomfortable history. But truth-telling is important. Facing up to shortcomings and learning from mistakes, even when they seemed so virtuous at the time, those are the hallmarks of a living faith, a living tradition that can become a leader as 21st century America becomes more and more secular. As I noted at the beginning of the service, we are a people of the wide path. We have among us mystics and secularists. And because our faith is based in values rather than beliefs, we can gather theists and atheists, creating beloved community and reaching out to a hurting world.
What good am I if I'm like all the rest? If I just turn away when I see how you're dressed? If I shut myself off so I can't hear you cry? What good am I? What good am I if I know and don't do? If I see and don't say, if I look right through you? If I turn a deaf ear to the thunder and sky, what good am I? What good am I while you softly weep? And I hear in my head what you say in your sleep. And I freeze in the moment like the rest who don't try. What good am I? What good am I? What good am I then to others and me if I've had every chance and yet still fail to see? If my hands are tied, must I not wonder within who tied them and why? And where must I have been? What good am I if I say foolish things and I laugh in the face of what sorrow brings? And I just turn my back while you silently die. 'What good am I? What good am I? What good am I?
What good am I? It's really an awesome question to ask ourselves individually and as a community. Perhaps you remember this line from Hillary Clinton's 2016 acceptance speech as the Democratic presidential nominee. Do all the good you can, for all the people you can, in all the ways you can, for as long as you can. It's a variation of a quote often attributed to John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. You know, the ones who are splitting over whether or not gay people can be married or can be ordained into ministry. And we can't be smug about the struggle. In the 1980s, Unitarian Universalists were asking those same questions about gay clergy. We just managed to reach conclusions based in love and acceptance a few decades before these other faith traditions. Apologies and forgiveness are still happening in our faith. In recent years, many of our congregations have adopted restorative justice and peace circles as a place where apologies and forgiveness can take place and relationships restored. We have a team of folks who have been trained in these techniques because we're not perfect. We mess up. The important thing is that we seek restoration to begin again in love. May we have the courage to apologize and forgive ourselves and one another.